Last month was Mental Health Awareness Month, and June's only a few days old, so I thought I'd give this story just a little space, right? Nearly half of Americans say finances are taking a toll on their mental health. More than a third of households have more credit card debt than emergency savings. Add to that the reports of a weakening consumer, and Houston, we got a problem. 47% of adults say concerns about money have at least occasionally caused anxiety, stress, worrisome thoughts, loss of sleep, depression, or other effects. Hey, welcome to my life. According to Bankrate's latest money and mental health survey, that was what they said, right? 65% of them say their biggest concern is inflation and rising prices, and nearly 60% say their stress derives from paying everyday things like groceries and utilities. 56% of the respondents also say that they're worried about having enough emergency savings. 47% are concerned about being in debt. And according to the survey as of November, 60% of households are living paycheck to paycheck. Wow. All right. Bankrate senior industry analyst Ted Rossman, he blamed persisting inflation, which has fallen considerably from the peak of 9.1%, but has progressed down to this 3% line, and we flatlined from there from basically last summer. And according to Rossman, that underscores how a lot of people are very close to the edge. It's just getting too much for them. Now, once what was considered a high income is now what's just needed to afford the essentials. Now, is there any way out of this? Is there any relief in sight? I don't know. My next guest might have some good ideas about this. Thanks for being on the show, Dave Stryzewski, CEO of Sound Planning Group. All right, Dave, I just wanted to highlight, by the way, just like I described my life right there. That's the joke of the whole thing. But I get how I just said in the last segment, if 10% of Americans own 93% of the stocks, that means 90% of the Americans really are not benefiting from this inflationary rally we've had since 2020 with the stock market, and or I suppose they're probably not going to have a bunch of real estate either if they don't own any stocks. So they're getting bled to death with this inflation and the day-to-day prices that they have to pay on top of the compounding. And I'll say one more thing and I'll give it over to you. When we say our inflation rate's 3.4%, that just means prices are 3.4% higher today than they were this time last year. But that's going to compound on whatever they were up last year from the year before that, right? So we've got a compounding rate where things are up between 20 and 25%, and I think that's low, but that's what they're telling us. And that's killing people because they're probably not getting a 25% raise, are they?
No, they're not. And Scott, I just so appreciate that you're having this conversation because, this 90% of America right now that doesn't own these assets that are going up and are keeping, the higher net worth houses more buoyant. They don't feel the pain nearly as much. And then 90% of families today are in big trouble. If I like to think about the world like this, if we think of, like our vision as having 2020 vision as having, clarity, I like to think of the world as pre-2020 and post-2020. Where was the average family pre-2020? And then where are they today, post-2020? If I got 2 points in time, I can measure a distance. I can see the trajectory that we're heading. And it is not a very pretty picture. I think that, how we should judge recessions is probably based upon how the middle class is doing, especially given the fact that that's 70% of our GDP is their actual spending. And so if we see them, not doing as well, and that's the real engine behind the United States, then I think, Houston, we got some big problems right now. And of course, the consumer doesn't have a printing press to go turn on like Uncle Sam, and they can't tax the population like Uncle Sam does. They're just having to work and spend. And candidly, I don't think it's been modeled very well for them here as they are running up record credit cards here today as they're just trying to keep up with just basic life expenses. It's just, I'm sorry, food and energy ends up being a big piece of most people's income. And if you're trying to raise a family these days, it is not an easy task.
Yeah, you touch those things every day. And those are the things that have gone up way more than the 20 to 25%. Number one. Number two is that, look, let's just think the three outcomes that the Fed can help them with. They cut rates, they keep them the same, or they hike them. All three of those scenarios hurt the 90%. They cut rates, inflation takes off again. That hurts the 90%. They leave them the same, that's a slow death. They bleed more. And if they hike them, obviously they got bank failures and they're going to be personal bankruptcies. There's no way out. What do you have?
Scott, I agree, man. There's no way out. This is a rock and a hard place. I think the Fed, I think that there's a lot that can go wrong from here. So, what is that actual path that the Fed takes? Unfortunately, it seems like there's going to be a lot of collateral damage for the average person, the average family.
Right.
And, the workers right now in the United States are becoming more fearful as well. I think the consumer sentiment, was polls that came out were very telling, because for about 3 months, they were kind of suspending judgment because the Fed had come out first part of the year. Hey, everything's amazing. We beat inflation, 6 to 7 cuts. And then, of course, that was completely wrong.
All right.
And I think guys like you and myself were sitting here saying, how in the world do they think that's possible?
Exactly right.
So as we've continued to go forward here, the consumer's like, way too much debt, 23% APRs, housing's unaffordable right now. Of course, the mortgage demand's lower than like any time in the last 30 years. And so these are terrible, terrible numbers
right.
and things. And so the fact that we can't recognize the warning signs that are going on right now, and there's many of our peers out there that are saying, hey, everything's so wonderful, everything's so awesome, and they're not preparing people for defense or the things that they should be doing, right. I think that's a big issue.
All right, we got to jump.
People should be working on.
Great
okay,
stuff.
do it.
No, great stuff. You're right. I appreciate it. It's like the Fed's asking us, how do we want to die, knife or a gun? Well, we're going to die either way. It doesn't matter. Thank you very much, David Stryzewski. Thanks for being on the show. Time to dial up